me, jazz is about responding to the now. It's an art form that is, by its very nature, temporal. You're improvising, playing jazz, you're making, or at least trying to make music in that moment, at that time. If you're not doing that, then people can tell. They may not be able to tell you that you know which particular 2/5 licks you're regurgitating, but they'll know that you're not being authentic, that you're not being real, and they'll vote with their feet. They'll be out of there. So we're going to kick off with a tune off our Jazz Trio album by Duke Ellington. It's called It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. I started on the saxophone, on the tenor saxophone, just before my 10th birthday. I was very fortunate to go to a school where music was central to what went on there, and especially in state education in the UK, that doesn't happen very often. Our deputy head teacher, Terry Roberts, used to hold a band rehearsal every lunchtime for half an hour, and then for an hour after school every week on a Friday evening. And that was just an incredible commitment from Terry, and I've been back numerous occasions since he retired, and we're still in touch. And that kind of enthusiasm kind of moved on to me as a student. I was playing the clarinet, miming my way through third clarinet parts, and my dad had always wanted to play the saxophone himself, so I think kind of naturally I ended up playing the saxophone because the school band needed a tenor saxophone player. But I do like to remind Terry Roberts the first time he met me that he thought I had the ideal teeth for a tuba player. I think that loosely meant that they needed a tuba player in the band, and I'm very grateful that my parents didn't kind of take me further down that route, because the tuba really wouldn't have suited my personality as I've got older. And it's an interesting question. I mean, did the sax shape me, or did being a saxophone player enable me to explore those aspects of my personality, such as improvisation, thinking on my feet, being so expressive? I mean, who's to know? But certainly it was a huge influence. And a lot of my friends play musical instruments. That was the great thing at the school. You were in the minority if you didn't play an instrument, which is so rare for so many schools, because actually it's the band geeks who kind of played the instruments. And that's what happened when I got to high school. The music there was not as good as it had been at primary school, until we got a new head of music, John Bowen, in year 9 when I was like 13, who absolutely transformed the place. I mean, I was doing West Side Story at 14, so that was kind of when I realised that I might actually have an aptitude to do this kind of thing. composition by Derek. It's usually the last thing a drummer says before they leave a band, which is, "Can we play one of my compositions?" But it's good. Although he says it's about Joel, not me. It's called Big Girl's Blouse.
Yeah, what is that? Big blouse.
1, 2. My interest in jazz came from my saxophone teacher, Ray Wilkes. Well, he used to, every time I made a mistake in a lesson, it would be, "No jazz, please, we're British," which I eventually nicked as an album title for a live album I did in 2010. Actually, there was this great thing of, oh, hang on a minute, you mean I can play something wrong, or I can play something creatively, and that's jazz, which is sometimes what some people go into. But it was during my teens with Ray and just kind of being shown these standards and, soloing through lead sheets, getting the Abersol books, and kind of realizing that I was doing okay at it. I mean, part of the reason behind that was probably because I'd been more or less self-taught on the piano stroke organ. My grandmother had an organ, and there's pictures of me as a 1-year-old, desperate to get up and play on the organ. So I had this interest in chords and this interest in harmony and how they work together, which kind of translated well to jazz. Then playing in jazz bands in school, and kind of every other kid was too scared to play at 14 solos, and I loved those bits so that I could get up there and show off. And then you sort of dig into the jazz history and you see the social history of it, and the fact that jazz came out of the African American culture of New Orleans, and that kind of social cohesion and lack of it, of the sort of 1940s, 1950s, 60s era. And then you find people like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, but particularly for me Coltrane. I mean, Ray Wilkes absolutely thought Coltrane was the man he is. So Ray's influence sort of got on to Coltrane, and from John Coltrane you find people like Sonny Rollins, Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young. So there was kind of a big influence there, which then led me on in 2003. I was at the Royal Northern College of Music and met Branford Marsalis backstage there, and struck up this conversation, and he gave me his email address and said, keep in touch, sort of thing, which I thought, yeah, he's probably going to read this once in a blue moon. And to be fair, he didn't. He replies, and still to this day I have this mentor relationship with him, where he's always very keen and so helpful to pass on advice. For me, he has the tone on the soprano saxophone. I don't think there's anybody in the world that has a better soprano tone than Branford, and he's sending me ideas of classical pieces, particularly to practice to improve my tone, because kind of music is music. It's not just practicing jazz or regurgitating licks. It's learning classical music, because actually the essence of all music is melody. That's what people want to hear when they come to gigs. They don't want to hear me or Joel or Derek or anybody else playing giant steps at 300 beats per minute as fast as we possibly can. There is a little bit of the audience that maybe likes those fireworks, but actually to appeal to people, what they want and what attracted me to jazz is those great melodies. Yes, there's the kind of interesting harmony, some of the harmonic ideas, but actually it's music that tells a story, and it's music that tells a story in that moment, and it's music that has a melody in whatever form that is that means something to people. So in my teaching, whether it's at the university or privately, my key thing is to try and inspire people. And that happens whether I'm teaching formally, when people come for lessons, or if people are coming to a jazz gig. I still think that is an opportunity for a teaching experience. It's a chance to inspire people, whether they play an instrument themselves or not. Teaching for me is about opening doors. It's about inspiring others into achieving their own creativity. Whether they're playing an instrument or not is not necessarily important. Yes, if people come for saxophone lessons, they get the saxophone lessons that they've asked for, but I want to sort of broaden their musical horizons much more. A lot of people may come in and the first question that I ask them is, why do you play the saxophone, or why do you want to play the saxophone? And so often the answer is it's the sound. And yet the saxophone is so similar to the human voice that there are so many different sounds. So each player has a unique sound. In fact, the greatest compliment you can probably pay a saxophone player or any musician is that they have their own sound. And I'm seeking and trying and practicing and trying to work hard at developing my own sound. And it's not just the tone in terms of how your particular saxophone itself sounds. It's what notes you play, what notes you don't play, how you play those notes, how you articulate them. Is so personal, and yes, you draw influences from your peers and from, in fact, I call them the musical parents, your heroes. But eventually, you want to sound like yourself.
So it's sort of going on F, A flat, then it goes to D flat, and then E, but it's not 1, 2, 3, 5. It's E, F sharp. Yeah. So just try that for me.
So Jazz Vespers started in New York in the 1960s at St. Peter's Lutheran Church, and it was a way of reaching out to the jazz community, because some, jazz musicians would be working in the clubs and the concert halls till very late at night, and they weren't going to show up for church on a Sunday morning. So the Reverend Peter Gensel set up this Jazz Vespers, which continues to this day. Every Sunday at 5 p.m. in New York there is a Jazz Vespers service. And so I'd heard about this through various different people through when I was studying theology. And so my idea of Jazz Vespers has spawned out of what happened at St. Peter's, and also through the collaborations I've had with people like Ewan King and the Kincaid Project, and also Jazz Church, and through what I've done with Malcolm Guy and Claire Henderson Davis. And we're looking really at the concept of the blues. We're looking at the sweet songs of sorrow, as Martin Luther King said in his speech about jazz to the Berlin Jazz Festival. And I felt that having come back to the church about 8-9 years ago, so much of what happens in church music is very good at singing the songs of joy, but is very bad at singing the songs of sorrow. And I feel that jazz gives a great opportunity to approach these traditional gospel songs, these old jazz standards, and some of the traditional spirituals as a vehicle for exploring the sort of darker periods in life, because as Luther King says in that speech, everyone has the blues and everyone longs for meaning, and jazz music enables and did enable, particularly in the kind of 50s and 60s, this whole African American identity thing, which speaks to all peoples. It's not just an African American thing. I mean, there is oppression all over the world now. There is still modern day slavery. There are these things that within the human condition, we have an opportunity, a gift as it were, from the Creator to actually explore these things through music. And for me, music it's difficult to explain things in words sometimes, and I think that's why we have music. Music kind of exists before that verbal part of the brain, and we've had music in all civilizations that have ever existed. We've had sort of kind of two things. We've had music and some form of worshipping a deity, whether it's the kind of the god in the trees, or a invisible god, or an idol. These things have existed in all cultures. Even in atheistic nations, there's still been worship of the collective, and so music has this incredible, powerful role to play in our civilization.
My mother-in-law was at a 21st birthday party many years ago. This is a true story. And there was a band playing. And it was her friend's cousin's band. And my mother-in-law didn't think they were up to much. A few weeks later, friend's cousin's band had an appearance on Radio Luxembourg, because this particular band had had a residency in Hamburg and been playing a lot of gigs over in Germany. And so my mother-in-law's friend said that we really should tune into my cousin Paul's band. They're on the radio. And cousin Paul wrote this with his friend John. Some of you might know it.
I'd wanted to have a jazz trio for a long time, which really loved those Sonny Rollins records, and Branford Marsalis and Joshua Redman, two more modern saxophone players who have done trio records recently. I had Mark Turner, sort of all guys who I really enjoy listening to. And I tried doing trio work about 10-15 years ago when I was back in the Northwest. I used to do a few gigs in Manchester at the Stock restaurant with a trio, and it was kind of so dependent on having a very, very, very good bass player. You need a good drummer, but you need an incredible bass player to be able to play well in a trio. So I came across Joel and Derek working through various gigs in Cambridge, and kind of put the idea to them, let's how do you feel about playing some pianoless trio music? And they were really up for it, and I knew that we had the combination there to work. So we got together in Derek's garage and just kind of jammed through some stuff, and it started sounding good. So I kind of just went out there to some of the promoters and agents we worked with and said, look, we're going out now. I'm going out as a trio, pianoless trio. When we look at doing something, and it's gone from strength to strength. There's an amazing musicianship in the group. There's a fascinating interplay between all three of us, and it feels like we're a band. It helps that we play together so often, and therefore we're able to create this stuff. And we've also written original music for our trio. Each of us on the album has an individual track, which was composed purely for the trio, which really goes down well. And yeah, there was also a big thing about so many venues now don't have good pianos, or don't even have a piano. So you're kind of going into a gig, and it kind of felt weird that we were going sort of unplugged for the piano, the bass, or the bass would go through an amp, but it would still be an acoustic instrument, and the sax might have a mic, but we're still, the only digital person there would be the piano player. And it kind of, for me, upset the apple cart somewhat, because I feel there's something very powerful. If you go and hear a symphony orchestra play, or go to a classical recital, there's something very powerful about that music, those vibrations being caused in that space and hitting your body. There's something very earthy about it. And I kind of think the moment you start sticking digital instruments in there, it's not there anymore. It's like these audiophile who love listening to vinyl. I get it, because there is something that is lost in this digital representation of music. For convenience it's nice, but actually for the acoustic, for the appreciation and for what it does to your body and to your mind and your soul, maybe, I think there's something very powerful about being in the same room where that air is being disturbed by the person creating the music and the person hearing the music. I think that's something very powerful, and that's what we've sought to do with the trio. Thank you. It's that time of the evening where we ask for a little bit of help from our audience. I wrote this composition, as many of you know, when I was living in Belfast. Yeah, just like that. And it's called the Cave Hill Stomp. And what I need you guys to be is our massed ranks of drummers. Okay, and I need you to beat this rhythm out for me. It goes like this. Down, down, down. So tap your feet, clap your hands. Tap your glasses if you need to. Come on, we need to make it louder for the film. What I've tried to do wherever I've had the opportunity to play a jazz gig, I don't like all the time just kind of hitting one venue and never going back there again. I like to build an audience. I like to build a relationship with that audience. So what we've done at the Haymakers, we've built this relationship with the venue and with the audience. That means something. You know, on the first Sunday of the month for Cambridge, that there's a great jazz gig going on at the Haymakers where there's going to be like-minded people who are into the music, and people who want to go there, and enjoy themselves. Not kind of be sat through a barrage of notes every Sunday night. We've built a great audience at the Haymakers, and I'd safely say that we've got one of the youngest average ages for a jazz audience in the UK. And somebody said to me the other week, "Oh man, I usually hate jazz, but I absolutely love what you guys are playing." And for me, and we weren't doing anything different. We were still playing jazz, but we were having fun. We were creating an environment where the creativity was happening, but we were also having some great fun at the same time, and people were coming along with it. And there was kind of all those elements that were in there, because so often people go to a jazz gig and they're just assaulted with notes, And sure, yeah, you know, at times I like to play a lot of notes as well, but it's balancing those things out and making sure that people are engaging with what you're doing.
I think it's multi-dimensional, actually.
It's much more fun coming and soaking in the atmosphere.
I think it's the interaction with the audience. And Dan's very good at that, I must say.
You can't simulate the sound of a live venue on a CD. Basically, when you hear these guys live, you hear everything in every instrument.
I do love the rhythm and the spontaneity.
It's just fantastic to listen to.